Krystal, what are you taking a look at?
Well, guys, back in Bill Clinton's 1996 State of the Union address, he famously declared that the era of big government was over. Well, not exactly correct, given that at least the defense spending part of the government certainly continuously balloons. His words marked the official death of the already decaying New Deal era. And his words affirmed that the new bipartisan era would be marked by privatization, deregulation, stripping the government of capacity, ceding governance to market wisdom, and imbuing in Americans a belief that the government was ultimately incapable of making their lives better. For Clinton and other ambitious climbers of his era, the future was neoliberalism, and they prospered politically on a personal level by placing their bets on deference to business and to the markets. Well, today, another ambitious climber has designs on the presidency and his finger in the wind. After surviving a recall, Gavin Newsom, governor of California, is placing some big policy bets in that state, hoping to use his achievements to launch a national campaign. And so far, although his ambitions are still limited very much by his fealty to the donor class, it is striking what a break the California agenda is with the old Clinton ways. On climate, healthcare, possibly on labor, California is embracing a muscular role for government and carving out a larger share for labor. Altogether, it could put the Golden State front and center, charting a new left alternative to neoliberalism. And if it fails, well, a lot more people are probably going to move to Texas. So here's what's going on. First off, California, might have seen this, is making big moves on electric vehicles. Governor Newsom recently signed a provision into law which would require 100% of new vehicle purchases to be carbon neutral by the year 2035. Now, in some senses, this was an easy one for the California governor, even though it does sound quite bold, because the public was supportive and industry was also supportive. Automakers were already making aggressive moves towards EVs. The big three automakers here have been working aggressively to secure the necessary raw materials so they can phase in electrics and phase out gas-powered vehicles, with hopes that the former will be made more affordable at scale and with the supply chain kinks worked out. Now, the new California law, it's going to phase in over time to that full carbon zero requirement. By 2026, 35% of cars have to be EV, and by 2030, that number rises to 68%. The car-buying public there is actually well on their way. About 15% of new car sales in California this year in the first quarter have already been electric. I've got no doubt, given sky-high gas prices in the state, that those numbers are going to continue to soar. The state also has the most built-out network of car charging stations, so while that's still an issue, they're in a better position than any other state in the nation. What's more, California has long set the national standard on car emissions. 15 states have already backed California's move, and about 4 more are looking to follow suit. When you put all these states together and the market power they command, California's new law may well make EVs the de facto law of the land. Now, there are a lot of big question marks on this policy, though. First of all, will this essentially amount to a tax on the middle class? Today, electric cars are significantly more expensive than gas-powered vehicles. The Inflation Reduction Act does include tax credits to try to make these vehicles more affordable, but more definitely needs to be done to make electric cars a reasonable purchase for far more people. Second, automakers are facing a massive multi-100,000 backlog for these vehicles right now. I personally put a deposit down on an EV nearly a year ago before the largest surge in purchases, and I am still waiting on delivery. Can they secure the raw materials and supply chains and workforce necessary to make mass-scale EV dreams a reality? Another big question there. Possibly, though, the biggest hurdle is California's straining power grid. Now, this was flagged to me by Saagar. The state literally just put out a bulletin warning of potential blackouts and requesting EV owners not to charge their cars, if possible, due to a big West Coast heat wave. Seems like kind of an issue for their imagined electrified future and a stumbling block for plenty of other states as well. So that is EVs, but that is really just the start. While California Democrats ultimately punted on universal health care, they are dabbling in public pharma in a way that is quite exciting and potentially quite meaningful. Now, as you likely know, millions of Americans depend on insulin, which, while cheap to produce, is insanely expensive for the American consumer. Americans pay on average $98.70 for 1 vial of insulin. That is 10 times higher than the cost in every other country when you average them together. The next highest cost country is Chile, where they pay $21 per vial. Still a comparative great deal compared to what our consumers are paying. It is an outrageous ripoff, and it's destroyed the lives of Americans, forced them to rack up debt or skimp on dosages, literally risking their lives. California's announced a $100 million investment in directly producing insulin to be sold at cost to California residents. basically a public option for pharma. And frankly, the only downside I see here is implementation. Assuming they can pull it off, I can't imagine the plan will be anything but popular and very beneficial. The only question is whether Big Pharma finds a way to sabotage or snuff this direction out. As we have seen many times, they certainly have their ways. Such a policy at the federal level could be transformational, given the Fed's ability to use Marchand rights to seize patents. Finally, though, the latest news out of California to me is the most thrilling. Then, thanks to a grassroots pressure campaign from the Fight for 15 movement, the California State Senate just passed a potentially landmark bill, which would institute a weak form of what's called sectoral bargaining for fast food workers. This is a baby step towards full-scale sectoral bargaining of the type in effect in several European countries, and at scale could be a game changer, truly, for workers. So to give you the basics here, right now, as you know, workers face a massive uphill climb towards collective bargaining, and the effort must be undertaken shop by shop by shop. That's what we've been tracking here so closely. Workers at Starbucks stores individually, REI stores, and one courageous Amazon warehouse, painstakingly going up against corporate giants and unfair rules to win a union. But that's only just the start. Next, they typically have to fight even harder to win a contract, as companies are basically allowed to stonewall, throw up objections, fire people, and drag their feet indefinitely. Now, in sectoral bargaining, as is indicated in the name, the bargaining happens by sector rather than store by store by store. So in the California example, workers across the entire fast food industry would benefit from the wage and working conditions set at the state level by a 10-member board with representatives from both workers and from industry. They'd be permitted to set the wage floor as high as $22 an hour, and the sector standards would apply to all workers at fast food chains with at least 100 locations nationwide. Now, here's the caveats. First and foremost, Governor Newsom hasn't said that he's going to sign it, so we'll have to see on that one. On the one hand, union support nationally is literally at its highest level since 1965 with 71% favorability. That's incredible. On the other hand, from Newsom's perspective, the donor class, and especially the powerful fast food industry, is in a total meltdown over this bill. So we'll see whether he calculates that public support or donor support is more useful for his future political ambitions. So that's number one. Second, the bill was weakened in the Senate, which prohibited the board from negotiating on paid and sick leave, also struck a provision that would have made parent companies responsible for the breaches of their franchisees. You want to talk about transformational, though? Just imagine if fast food jobs were actually solid middle-class jobs. That would lift standards, of course, for those workers, but also for other workers as their employers were forced to compete as well. Now, it says a lot about the decline of neoliberalism that an ambitious political wind-sniffer like Newsom is rejecting the Clintonian mantra that the era of big government is over, leaning into government intervention in key sectors of industry, rejecting in key ways the economic ideology that has dominated for the better part of 50 years. The politicians, they haven't changed, but perhaps the winds have. And you see this too. We've talked about this some with the Biden administration. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.